Donald Trump says mental illness and hatred pulled the trigger and not the gun. This after two mass shootings in the United States over the weekend killed 29. The Indian government makes good on its promise and revokes a special status awarded to Kashmir. Internet services have been suspended and thousands of troops have been deployed to calm any unrest. And Hong Kong's chief executive resists calls for her resignation, saying protesters are placing the region's one country, two systems policy in jeopardy. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. We begin with news that the US President Donald Trump has blamed hatred and mental illness after this weekend's mass shootings. 29 people were killed and nearly 50 others injured in the span of 24 hours in Dayton, Ohio and El Paso, Texas. The US President called for bipartisan efforts to deal with the problem of gun violence, but Donald Trump failed to outline any plans to tighten gun control.
The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America. Hatred warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul.
That was the U.S. President speaking there. Now, for more on this story, we can bring in our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Rob, we just heard from Donald Trump there. He spoke about white supremacy and he's issued calls for bipartisan efforts to deal with the problem of gun violence. But how are the Democrats going to react to that speech?
Well, they'll react positively to what they just heard there, that little clip we played there when he's talking, condemning white supremacy and racist hatred. You know, many Democrats have criticized Donald Trump in the past for precisely that, and I'm sure will continue to do so, because whatever he's saying, whatever he said in that speech today, there are other occasions when he's said things which many would consider as to be encouraging racism.
Because he's been accused of emboldening the problem.
Absolutely, quite clearly, categorically, by several different Democratic senators and members of the House of Representatives. So that's not going to change, but I think the fact that he's speaking in those terms now is encouraging. They'll probably be encouraged too that he's recognized the problems of the internet, and they will support the idea of a bipartisan approach, but based on what? I mean, this is the question. There was nothing in this speech to suggest that he has ideas that are going to appeal to the Democrats as well as Republicans. There's no talk about background checks.
He never mentioned background checks once. He said that people who would carry out attacks should not have guns, but he didn't.
No, he spoke about red flag laws,
exactly.
Checking into people with a history of mental illness. And I think he's trying to suggest this seems to be the approach of what he's been saying in this speech and also in his tweets before that the problem really in these two incidents and in previous ones was one of mental health. Yeah. It's not a problem with the existing gun laws, that something has to be tweaked in order to prevent this sort of thing happening. And a couple of things have to be done. First of all, there have to be red flag laws into place so the FBI is watching for people with a history of mental illness and making sure that they're not off the charts. Also, more attention has to be paid to what he called the hatred on the internet. Well, you know, nobody, I think, would particularly question that, but I think that what he'll founder on, at least with the Democrats, is much more needs to be done than that. There has to be really far-reaching legislation in place, as we've seen in other countries that have dealt with the problem. Australia, New Zealand, for instance, countries which have faced similar problems to that of the United States, but have acted in a much more aggressive way to the problem. I don't think any Democrats who have been watching Donald Trump make that speech today are going to be convinced in the slightest. They're going to be looking for much more. Remember, after the Florida school shootings last year, he was actually talking about background checks then, but since has done everything he can to prevent any sort of legislation getting into law. Threatening to veto legislation that the House of Representatives, which is now dominated by the Democrats, of course, should get into place. So, you know, I think there will be a recognition that some of the language that he's using is a step forward, but disappointment that there's nothing concrete there.
Nothing concrete, because we do have elections coming up next year, so we'll see how Democrats react. Thank you very much for that, Rob Parsons. Now, the government in India has scrapped the special status awarded to Kashmir. Article 370 of the Indian Constitution allowed the region to make its own laws and curb non-residents from buying property. The Indian Home Minister believes the move will integrate India's only Muslim-majority region with the rest of the country. Telecommunication services in the state have been blocked, political leaders have been placed under house arrest, and thousands of troops have been deployed to the area. Earlier, I spoke to our correspondent Shazeb Wala in Islamabad and asked him about the latest reaction from Pakistan.
There has been a statement issued by the Foreign Office of Pakistan condemning the actions taken by the Indian government and have said that Pakistan will exercise all possible options to stop this illegal action from taking effect. The Foreign Office statement also stressed that the Kashmir is internationally recognized internationally recognized disputed territory, and no unilateral decision by India can change it. The statement went on to mention that the United Nations Security Council resolution of 1949 also mentions Kashmir as a disputed territory. The Foreign Minister of Pakistan has also given out a statement to a local TV channel stating that India is playing a very dangerous game, and this move will further escalate the tensions between in the Kashmir Valley. The Army Chief of Pakistan has also called a meeting of top military generals for Tuesday to discuss the changing situation in the valley.
Okay, now in the past few hours, we had the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, who's put out a tweet calling for Donald Trump to mediate. Do people in Pakistan really want the United States getting involved in this conflict?
Well, Pakistan has always kept a stance that that the international community needs to intervene in the Kashmir dispute to resolve it. But India has always said that it's a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. Well, if we look at the recent relationship, the recent relations and the developments between Pakistan and the U.S., we see that the relationship between India and U.S. Between Pakistan and the U.S. Has become better, mainly because of Pakistan's support for the peace talks between the Afghan Taliban and the U.S.
Okay,
so Pakistan wanted to use these good relations to ask U.S. to mediate in the Kashmir issue, but in the opinion of the experts, this move has actually backfired, as India today gave out a strong message that it won't take any international pressure when it comes to the Kashmir issue.
Hong Kong came to a standstill once again this Monday. Public transport was paralyzed for several hours and police fired tear gas at protesters. The city's chief executive resisted calls for her resignation. Carrie Lam warning Hong Kong is being placed on a path of no return. Yuka Roya reports.
Medics tend to a young man washing his eyes and nose. Police fired tear gas at protesters, the latest in about 1,000 rounds they've fired since June the 9th. A third straight day of unrest began with demonstrators blocking roads and public transport, paralysing traffic during morning rush hour.
I don't think that they are wasting their time, even mine, but I think that they are spending their time to doing the right things.
We want a universal suffrage. We want withdrawal, complete withdrawal and a legal withdrawal of the extradition bill.
Hundreds of flights were also cancelled as employees walked out in response to calls for a general strike. Chief Executive Carrie Lam accused protesters of endangering Hong Kong.
Such extensive disruptions in the name of certain demands or uncooperative movement have seriously undermined Hong Kong's law and order.
What started out as an outcry against a now shelved extradition bill that would have allowed authorities to send suspects to be tried in mainland China has evolved into a wider protest against Beijing's encroachment on civil liberties and against the Hong Kong government.
Everything they said in those press conferences, this repeats the same things again and again without addressing our needs.
Police say more than 420 people have been arrested in the past 2 months.
That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching.